Back in the early 1800s, there was a group of women studying the Bible. They were in Dublin, and they came across this verse from Malachi chapter 3, verse 3. He will sit as a purifier and refiner of silver. And the women read that, and they were really puzzled as to what that meant. So one of them decided she was going to go visit a silversmith and report back to the group. So she went to a silversmith, and without telling him what she was trying to get at, he described for her his silver refining process. And she looked at him and said, "But sir, do you just sit and watch while the silver is being purified and refined?" And he said, "Oh yes, I have to sit and watch it, because if it's left in for even a minute too long, it will be injured." And she said, "Oh, now I know what that Bible verse is about. That Spirit sits and watches. That Spirit is there with us through the trials of life, when we're in the heat of the moment, when we're being heated up. Spirit is there, watching us, being with us, making sure we're not in there too long." And then he said to her, "And I know the silver is done when I can see my reflection in it." And it became even more clear that when we're in the throes of a challenging time or a difficult time, or when life is heating up for us, that we don't see our wholeness. That once we can see our wholeness, once we can see the reflection of the divine in ourselves, our challenges don't have to be so difficult. That we have been refined, that we have come to a place of recognizing our wholeness, that the Creator created it this way to help us to choose to be refined instead of staying in victimhood. I love that Elizabeth Lesser says, it's a quote from Rumi, and she says on page 109, "There is some kiss we want with our whole lives." There's some kiss we want with our whole lives. And think about a kiss, it's sweet, it's sweetness. But what is that kiss that we want with our whole lives? And I think from reading her chapter that she's referring to, or Rumi is referring to, we're seeking this wholeness. We're seeking to really know ourselves. We're longing to be refined, to see the image of the divine in ourselves. It's not an easy thing. But one thing we all have in common, there is one thing that we were all created the same, having, and that is wholeness. We were all created whole. We weren't all necessarily created nice or wicked or smart, but we're all created whole. And whole meaning it's all there. Every possibility of the human expression is there. Now, we can choose whether to express it or not, but we are whole. We often don't see that in our lives. We often only see part of ourselves. We don't know wholeness. And so sometimes because we don't know that wholeness, we find ourselves lured into some challenging times, either by our choice or by circumstance. And in this part of our book, we're finishing up our 6-week small group series using Elizabeth Lesser's book, Broken Open. And this section of the book is called The Shaman Lover. And in this section, Elizabeth explains or gives us her process, her phoenix process, how she came to be broken open and she calls it the Shaman Lover, because she was in a place of feeling dead inside, in a place of not recognizing her wholeness, not wanting to face the truth of her marriage that had gone stale. And so what happens when we're in a place like that is we are very susceptible to the seduction of something else in our lives. In her case, it was an extramarital affair. In other cases, in other people, it could be something entirely different. It could be an addiction to alcohol or drugs or gambling or sex. It could be any number of things where we are seduced into thinking that is going to bring us happiness because we're not facing the truth of our lives, of what's going on in our lives. And in these moments, we don't recognize ourselves. Elizabeth Lesser talks about how she didn't even know who she was anymore, that she was living these lies, and that she was ignoring her children and her duties. And we can see how easy it is for that to happen. She was looking on the outside for love instead of looking on the inside. And we can all do this. We all do this at times. We all cheat divinity by looking outside for what we need within, for what is already there within. But for some reason, we're afraid to see it, or we're afraid to admit it, or we're just afraid to acknowledge that we have another part to ourselves than the part we show the world. And this kind of the drawback of social media is that we're just seeing what people want us to see about themselves. We're not seeing the whole picture. We're not seeing the wholeness of the person. We're seeing an image. And we become so susceptible to dark times, difficult times, challenging times, when we don't see our wholeness. It's on the inside where spirit dwells, where we see the fullness of ourselves. We can use our challenges, our shaman lovers, if you will, to open us up to the truth, though. Oftentimes, we hit rock bottom before we get there. Not always. But we get to a point where we're not even sure who we are anymore. And this is what happened to Elizabeth Lesser in this section of the book. The shaman lover opened her to the truth that her marriage had been dead for many years. It opened her to wanting to live a life of integrity and fullness and experience the full spectrum of what it means to be human. It was kind of a refining process for her. And we all go through these refining processes where we seek our wholeness, that kiss that we want with our whole beings. We want to come into the wholeness of ourselves. It's what we all long for in life, even though we don't often know it. So whatever that refining process is for us, it's like we're in a trance. And a shaman is like that. A shaman is someone who interacts with the spirit world and does a healing. And often people that are working with a shaman feel like they're in a trance. And we can feel like we're in a trance when we're just going our day-to-day routines, living from our patterns, instead of being fully awake. We want to escape our lives. And when we want to escape our lives, we're not fully engaged with who we are. Most of the time, we prefer to stay blind and stay comfortable and stay with what's familiar, but what's familiar keeps us small. We want to use that shaman lover, so we want to use those difficult times to wake us up, to refine, to come into our wholeness. Elizabeth Lesser says this on page 113, "What matters is that we take the deadness of the soul seriously, that we pay attention to the contents of the heart, that we ask the hard question, and fearlessly face the hidden parts of the self. What matters," Jung said, "is that we shine the light of consciousness in the dark corners of our life. What is not brought to consciousness," he says, "comes to us as fate." Now, fate does not mean predetermination. We don't teach predetermination in Unity. Fate is what comes to us in life, and then free will is how we choose to respond to it. There's a certain synchronicity to life, that we're all in this one field, and things kind of move around in order for us to learn what we need to learn. And oftentimes we attract ourselves to situations unconsciously that can help us learn more about ourselves. There's always an opportunity to find that kiss that we've wanted with our whole lives. There's an ancient Islamic story of a man who was searching for a key he had lost under a street lamp. Another man came by and said, "What are you looking for?" And he said, "I'm looking for a key that I lost." And so the man says, "Well, I'll help you." And they both are looking under the street lamp for this key. And the man says, "This is strange that if you dropped it here, why neither of us can see it?" And he said, "Where exactly did you drop it?" And he said, "Oh, about 50 yards down that way." And the guy says, "Well, why are you looking here under the street lamp?" He said, "Well, there's light here." I love that story because we're not willing often to look at the dark side of ourselves. We want to look in the light. But what we're seeking, that wholeness of ourselves, isn't in the light. It's in the darkness. The wholeness of us. Those parts of ourselves that we maybe are embarrassed of, or we're afraid to let other people see. Maybe we've been shamed into thinking that we were wrong, or we failed, or we were a failure, or unworthy. And so we don't want to look at that. We leave that in the darkness. We keep it as a secret instead of bringing it into the light and living a full life that is liberating and free. We can't experience our wholeness without admitting our failures and our mistakes, our character flaws. Richard Rohr, Franciscan priest, says this in one of his blogs: "One of the great surprises on the human journey is that we come to full consciousness precisely by shadowboxing, facing our own contradictions and making friends with our own mistakes and failings." Those are the things that help us see our wholeness. And I would add, and love ourselves anyway. Love yourself anyway. Not everything in life is good, but there is good in everything. There is a goodness and a lesson in everything, if we're willing to look for it. And when we're willing to accept our mistakes and our flaws and our failures, we can feel the fullness of life. Often we've been told that parts of ourselves are socially unacceptable. But if that's true, every person on this planet has parts that are socially unacceptable. What if we all just accepted them and allowed ourselves to be vulnerable what deeper connections we would have. Your conscious personality will sometimes feel shattered and scattered and overwhelmed. Your ego might even experience a death. But when we experience a death of that ego, we rise from the ashes like the phoenix. We rise to new life. We rise to a new way of being. This was a really difficult week for me in working with this material. It brought up a lot of feelings about my own divorce. I didn't have a shaman lover that ended my marriage, but I really resonated with Elizabeth Lesser in how she felt when she came into realization, when she came to the point of divorce, when she came to know that her marriage had been dead for years. And I really struggled. I'd done forgiveness work on this for years, a long time ago, and thought I was over it. And what I noticed this week is that as I'm reliving my own divorce story that happened 20 years ago, I was feeling shame and guilt and sadness for breaking up my family, for having my kids to have to go back and forth between their dad and me. They didn't like it. And at the time, I felt very justified that I needed this, that this was what was best for my soul. And I still believe that. But those feelings of shame and guilt can creep up when we don't expect them to. And then we need to do the work, the forgiveness work, forgiveness for ourselves. It says in John chapter 8, verse 7, let he without sin cast the first stone. But when do we stop casting those stones at ourselves? Self-compassion is called for. Acknowledging that I made a choice years ago to end my marriage. And when I'm looking at it from a shameful, guilt-ridden place, I'm only looking at it from the human side and not the spiritual side. That decision, those choices that I made 20 years ago, those actions that I took, have made me who I am today, as much as going to ministerial school. And the same is true for all of us, that our mistakes, seeming mistakes, our flaws, the choices we make, all have a lesson for us. And they make us the person we are, as much as any training does. We want to recognize the wholeness of ourselves. And I can look back now at that time in my life, and yeah, it was a choice my soul needed to make. And the guilt and the shame no longer serve me. There's no reason to hold on to that. Fortunately, I had an appointment with my spiritual director on Friday who really helped me to see this. If we only look to the human aspects of ourselves, we're really likely to judge ourselves and judge others. We're not likely to see the whole, complete picture, the whole story of who we are, of where we are on this journey. of seeing the wholeness of us, the oneness of us. During Lent, we're working with Renew and Release, Unity's Lenten booklet. It's available outside on by our front door and in our bookstore if you want to pick up a copy. It's really good this year. Each Sunday, they talk about a living word, and the words come from the last words that Jesus spoke on the cross. This week, the living word is oneness, which ties in beautifully with our wholeness theme today, with our need to see ourselves as whole. The words from the cross were to Mary, Jesus' mother, and his disciple John, and he says, to Mary, behold your son, and to John, behold your mother. And what he's establishing with these words is right relationship with each other. That the biology of it doesn't matter, that we are all connected, that we are all one, that we need to give up the illusion of separation. Stop looking at everything from a dualistic perspective and just accept our wholeness in spirit. When we can accept our wholeness, that we are complete just as we are, then we can accept it in everyone else that we encounter. We can see our oneness. We can see how all of us have fears and challenges and seeming failures. And all of us are on a journey to learn and experience and discover and uncover who we are in this lifetime. And as we do this, we can use that shaman lover, use that experience, that difficulty to refine ourselves, to be a better version of ourselves, a kinder, newer, freer, less wounded version of ourselves. Become more awake. One of the resources I use is truthunity.net, and on the homepage this week, there was an article about a YouTube video called Into Great Silence. And Into Great Silence is a documentary. It's 2.5 hours long, and it's about the Carthusian monks in the French Alps, and it shows their life. Now, these are Roman Catholic, Orthodox Roman Catholic Christians. The most strict, severe way of living. They only get 2 family visits per year and 1 hour of conversation on Sundays after the Sunday meal. And other than that, they read and sing and chant and pray and work in their gardens and do their chores, and they don't speak. And one of them was quoted saying, "Join me in becoming God." What if we all were able to say that to each other? Join me in becoming God. Join Jesus in becoming God. Didn't Jesus come here and show us how to be that? How to live a spiritual life? But that join me to becoming God is what the Christian journey is all about. Becoming more godlike, becoming more whole. Seeing the goodness in ourselves, seeing the goodness in each other. It's a work of consciousness. Each of these monks doing their work is allowing themselves to break open, to love and to forgive, and to accept all aspects of themselves, just as we are invited to do this work. Elizabeth Lesser says on page 115, "Now I know that when we show only our light side to the world, our shadow grows restless, sucking into itself much of our energy and passion. In order to release my trapped energy and awaken my best qualities, I had to engage with my shadow. I had to see how everything that I had judged and feared in others was also in me. I had to be broken open so fully that my whole self was laid out before me to own and to forgive and to love. I love that. We are all complete as we are. Often when we think of the word lust, that we lust after something or someone, it's because we don't feel complete in ourselves. I won't feel complete unless I have that. But we are complete in ourselves. That we can look within, as Lord Shiva did, the Hindu god who created this third eye, to look within himself, to stop gazing outwardly and gaze within, and see that we are all whole and complete. We can use difficult times to refine, like the silversmith. Use that furnace to refine until we see the eyes of God looking back at us in its reflection. So are you willing to look at your life and not only see the light side, but also see the dark side? Are you willing to engage with your shadow, to experience all of life, your wholeness, and to live a more full, more abundant, more joyful life? To forgive and love the shadow self. It's up to you. You can use difficulties as a shaman lover to come into your wholeness, to wake up to your wholeness, to see yourself for who you are, whole, complete, and free. I'm going to close with a quote that Elizabeth Lesser shares from one of her friends in the final chapter in this section. She says, "How strange to find in the midst of life's drama the springboard to who I really am." The springboard. Use life's difficulties. We're invited to always use life difficulties to springboard us to who we really are. Now I want to lead you into a time of meditation. On Friday, when I was with my spiritual director over the phone, she did a meditation with me. I asked if I could use it, and she said, "Oh, Sue, I just made it up." So I said, well, I'm going to attempt to use similar words that you use because it was really beautiful. So I invite you to take a deep breath. Gently close your eyes. Allow yourself to sit in whatever circumstances are going on in your life, to just allow them. Be aware that our challenges, your challenges, may have brought up some emotions. Some emotions like guilt or shame or fear or anxiety, whatever it is for you. Emotions that aren't serving us. Emotions that aren't serving you any longer in your life. It doesn't mean we erase the past or ignore the past. We accept the past. But these emotions associated with it are no longer serving us. And so we're sitting on the mantle of a fireplace. Imagine yourself there. Feel the heat. Hear the crackling of the logs burning. And in your hand is a velvet bag It's a beautiful purple bag. And it has a gold drawstring top. And the bag is open and it's in your hand. And in that bag, you're going to put any feelings of shame, any feelings of guilt, any feelings of fear, of self-loathing, of unforgiveness. Anything that is no longer serving you is going to go into that velvet bag with the gold cord. Feel yourself feel lighter as you put these items, these emotions into this bag. And then pull the string tight. You don't want them back. You want them to stay in the bag. And once that cord is pulled tight, see yourself just tossing that velvet bag into the flames. Watching that bag of negative emotions, of feelings that are harmful to us. Watching it go up in flames. Watching it burn. They need no longer hurt you. And out of those flames, then you start seeing your face. Your face is smiling. It is joyful. Your eyes have a sparkle. You recognize that it's your face, but also the face of God. And you are free. You hold that image in your mind for a few moments as we rest in the silence.